Welcome to another episode of Relatively Damaged Live. My name is Angela.
And I'm Kat.
The live shows are currently streamed Mondays on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Remember to follow or subscribe and share with your friends. On the Monday segment of this show, Kat and I discuss topics we find interesting for about 30 minutes. So let's get to today's topic. What is resentment and how does it impact us? Shall we chat for a brief moment before we go into the quote?
Sure. I'm sorry, I just had something in my eye.
What's your experience of resentment?
Resentments. I have found that resentments are just things that have built up over time, and I have taken them, and you've heard the phrase, make a mountain out of a molehill. Man, I have made lots of mountains in my life.
Me too.
And so you take this one thing which could be so small. Oftentimes I find it's just a misunderstanding, but because I've had this fear of confronting it, it's just blown up into this huge thing. And it's been interesting to learning. And here I'm going to continue with my metaphor here. How to take dynamite to those mountains and blow them up and make them back to the size that they're really supposed to be. And so hopefully we can get into what is it and how does it impact us, and maybe even move towards giving people clues to resolution.
My favorite quote, I think it goes something like this: expectations are resentments just waiting to happen. And that has definitely been my experience. But Brene Brown just came out with her new book, Atlas of the Heart, where she talks about different emotions. And in that book, she actually states what resentment is. So resentment is the feeling of frustration, judgment, anger, better than, and or hidden envy related to perceived unfairness or injustice. It's an emotion that we often experience when we fail to set boundaries or ask for what we need, or when expectations let us down because they were based on things we can't control, like what other people think, what they feel, or how they're going to react. I love that quote.
It's a excellent definition of that. And I love that in that definition, it gives us clues on what we need to work on.
Yeah, it really does, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't control what other people think, feel, or how they react. Ever.
Right.
Even with my kids. And trust me, there are times I want to control them.
I hear you on that one. I know that being a child of someone, I've been on that other receiving end of it.
I love, though, when I'm a child. As a child, it didn't matter if I was frustrated or upset. I mean, it did. My mom didn't like it, right? But from my perspective, these emotions just came up, and I didn't have to figure them out. I didn't even try to understand them. I just was,
Mm-hmm.
And now I understand them, and it's like, because I have more knowledge, I can be, but I can't just be. I don't know how to explain it better than that.
I do. I think, even as a child, yes, we had those emotions and we could just live in those emotions. But knowing how to get past them, understanding, are these based in a reality of the situation? One of the key words here, perceived unfairness or injustice. That perceived.
Yeah.
That's my perception. A small child, a toddler, they want what they want when they want it.
True.
And how they want it. And so that's all they know. They don't have the the ability to see past that and to rationalize it and reason with it. They are just knowing the instinct of I want it.
Okay. Becky is also my mom. Hi, Becky. Hi, Trevor.
That's what I was laughing at. I saw a flash up there.
And she did make a comment here. She says, "What did I not like?" Mom, I love you. We were talking about not liking emotions and typically expressing anger and frustration. And, who as a mom ever likes it when their kid is angry and frustrated? So, Mom, I'm glad to have you here and happy to answer your questions anytime you want. I am feeling a little flushed over here. I forgot Mom is a regular watcher of this show, but it's really hard as a parent sometimes, because at least for me, I want my kids to love me, and sometimes I think those emotions mean they don't love me. And even though I know that's not true, how I respond to them, but if I don't address it, that's when that resentment comes in and I start feeling angry. And, especially if I see them like playing a video game or something and the house is a mess, which really causes me anxiety, or they've left things out, because I can't just fix it, that then it's like I want to be mad at them and I start resenting them for even playing the game, because that's not done. And the reality of it is, I think I should be able to expect them to quote unquote pick up their socks, as Byron Katie says, but do I really want to make that my religion? Or is there something in me, right, the picking up of the socks, or is there something in me that maybe I could do differently with them? Or maybe I need to have another conversation. But if I don't address it, then definitely I'm definitely gonna resent it.
Well, you just said something interesting now. Maybe there's something with me. And isn't that usually the case? I mean, so in your case, boundaries are, I expect you to pick up your socks.
Right.
Before you start playing the video game.
Mm-hmm.
And, so you set that boundary. The boundary might be violated. But again, is it your religion? Is it that important to you to have those socks, picked up? And do you want to get into that? My kids don't love me. They don't listen to me. They don't accept my boundaries, blah, 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 blah. Getting into that cycle is how that resentment is built up.
Right. So it seems to me like I might need to set like a better boundary. Like Dr. Cloud says, setting consequences in place gives the person a clear choice and sets them free to make it.
Yes.
So then I don't have to do anything except because even though they might be mad that the Wi-Fi is going to go off to the game. Well, you were free to make that choice.
Right. And there the thing is, now when you're dealing with adults, that there's a more equal relationship. It's a little bit different. And, I'll just say this, yesterday I had a migraine and I was not feeling well. And I just wanted to sit on the sofa with my dogs and do nothing. Mm-hmm. And it was and I wanted them to sit with me so I could pet them for comfort. Of course, the dogs had a different idea. They're dogs. Michelle kept coming in and out, in and out, in and out. And it was just like, go away, leave me alone. And I started having, like I said, building up that resentment. Like, don't you see I don't feel good? Just go away and leave me alone. kind
Mm,
of thing.
yeah.
But of course, I never said it. It's
You
just my
didn't.
perception. I didn't. I didn't. And it was my perception. Like you should know my boundaries. You should know what's going on with me and do as I want you to do. But see,
Ooh.
and I knew that perception was wrong.
The perception of she should know what you need.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Especially if I don't state it. So I say all this, we all get into these little traps. And even if it was, it was a small thing, a small resentment, um, you know, when I really looked at it, I was just like, why are you going, why are you reacting the way you're reacting? You didn't say that you just wanted to be left alone. You didn't say that you wanted quiet because you had a headache. I mean, this is what I'm telling myself. And,
Mm-hmm.
so why was I hold on to this resentment?
So you weren't expressing what you needed, and yet you wanted her to know exactly what it was that you needed.
Well, of course.
Okay,
you know,
so Trevor, I think, is saying this in response to the dogs, right? That they can feel what you think. And while that's true for dogs, I don't know that it's 100% true for humans.
yes. And even the dogs sometimes are overwhelmed by their own instincts. If the dog is sitting quietly and sees a squirrel, running across the yard, they're going to chase the squirrel. That instinct to chase is much stronger than it is to be connected with me. And if the other person in the house comes in, they want to greet the other person and do all that kind of stuff. So they were pretty good, but when other things disrupted it,
Yeah.
the calm and the peace, that was when it was just like, hey, come back here.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if some of your resentment, while not being able to share what you needed, was maybe a little bit of envy that you couldn't be doing other things, but Michelle could. Or
Yeah. That was part of it too. I we usually go out to the store together, and I just did not feel like going out to the store and do the things that just the shopping, but it's just time we get to spend together. And I was just like, no. So all those things that she says in the quote, that's kind of what was happening. The thing is that I didn't let it become a mountain. I realized what I was doing when I analyzed myself, when I felt myself, that resentment building inside of me. I was like, why am I letting this bother me? I said, okay, I don't feel good. That's the number one thing.
mm-hmm.
And then I looked at my reactions, and I'm like, that's not right. And I did apologize to her later. I said, I'm sorry, I've been so cranky today.
Well, you had a headache. Now, it sounds like you almost took away the excuse of it's all her fault. I'm miserable. She should know what I need. So you couldn't blame her anymore for what was happening inside of you.
Right. Because I changed my perception. So my perception initially was, she should know what it is that I need. She should know that I'm not feeling well. She should know to leave me alone, blah, blah, blah. And like, no, she shouldn't necessarily know that. I'm a reasonable adult, who has a voice, and I could say, I don't feel well. Would you mind? And that would have taken away a lot of it. A lot of it right there. If I say, I don't feel well, can you just let me be quiet?
Right.
And same thing, give your children a choice. Pick up the socks, or I'm going to cut the Wi-Fi off.
Right.
That's the consequence. That's the consequence of not doing, following the established norms of the house.
Right. And then teaching them also to be in, I think it's also really interesting to trying to teach them what it's like to be in relationship with other people on an equal basis, right? Or because as they get older, I don't the threat of turning something off in response to cleaning something is a much more difficult place to go in my mind,
Right.
because
Sure.
that's not the reality of what happens in relationships later in life. Like, just because somebody doesn't do what you want doesn't mean you get to go turn something off,
Hmm.
right? Like, that's just not how adult relationships work.
That's true.
I mean, you know, I'm pretty sure I thought they did, or I tried, because of how I grew up and different things like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if we're not on the same team, we're in big trouble.
Right. And, you know, is that why there is so much dysfunction in relationships? Is that reasons why divorce rates are so high and things like that? Because people don't know how to express their needs,
Hmm.
um, or their wants or the desires.
Well, and
And
then come to those mutually agreed upon expectations.
right, of
Like,
each
how do you
other.
get there? Yeah.
And I mean, I just know in past relationships that was some of the downfall, was that we hadn't discussed those things, and the resentments built up until they became so big that the only way to overcome them was to separate.
Yeah. And then, because at that point it's too far gone.
Right. And the things that were never discussed uh, came to a head. Specifically, I mean, big things: where to move. What kind of life do you want? What are the expectations of where we're going from here on this great journey of life? And so that meant, uh, because I wasn't able to express what I wanted, what my expectations were, what I thought was going to happen in that relationship. And the other person was not able to express that either. So we both had this resentment build up, each thinking that we were going to do what the other one wanted, and neither of us was willing to do that until it came to a head. And then it was just like, what are we going to do? Um, and other things, other relationships, like at work. I wanted a promotion, someone else got it. How do I deal with that person? How do I
Hmm.
deal with the boss who didn't give me that promotion? You know, and it was very, very interesting. And in early on, how I dealt with that disappointment, and then later on how I dealt with that disappointment,
Yeah.
as I learned how to deal with those expectations.
Can you give us an example of an early on and a later on?
Um, and
Or is it?
early on expectation was, um, when the boss came to me and said, "I want you to interview for this position. I want you to test for it, and I want you to interview for it because I want you in the position." And then coming back and I didn't get it. That was pretty hard, and understanding the reasons why, and maybe this is still a little bit of resentment I'm hanging on to. I don't know. um, but I thought that was unjustified. um, and when somebody basically tells you you're going to get it and then doesn't give it to you, I mean, that was a tease. So there was a lot of resentment for the longest time in that. And it was hard to stay there and continue to work there and have a working relationship with both of them. The person who got the position that was supposed to come that I thought was mine, and then the boss. And I think in a way that derailed my career a little bit, because I'm certain I did not behave my best.
The resentment
I think
then
the resentment, I think, let it eat at me. And I think it damaged the interpersonal relationships a bit. Even though I was able to do my job, but let's face it, part of working today, it's not just being able to make widgets. It's how you interact with other people. And when you're when I was holding on to that resentment, it was very difficult to interact positively.
Right. So it actually colored your behavior towards them, because the story was, I should have had this position, and because I didn't have this position, I'm angry, and therefore now you're not going to have those your interactions. Even if you think you're being nice, subconsciously then you're probably doing something to sabotage it, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Now I'm far enough removed from it and worked through a lot of that I think I can pretty much say that. And then later on in my career, when a position that I wanted, and I thought I had a great interview for it, although I wasn't basically promised it, as in the other example, and then got cut out of the process. I had a much different attitude towards it, and I actually became pretty good friends with the person who had gotten the position. It was somebody from the outside, and I was able to sit down and say, I thought that there was some hinky stuff going on with the hiring in both cases, but I was able to state it and to say, this is how I feel. That being said, I wasn't going to let that resentment eat me at that point.
Right. So in that case, just going back to the quote, there was this better than in the first instance, that then the second time you were able to overcome that, and it wasn't about you per se, maybe.
Right.
The
first time I took it very personally. The second time I thought, okay, I understood what they were going for. Mm-hmm. What they really wanted was somebody from the outside. They wanted new blood.
Well, and something happens, right, with new blood.
Yeah. And, so instead of being, I paid my dues, I've been here forever, I really wanted this job, I was just like, okay, fine. They wanted somebody, from the outside. And I'll do my best to support that person, even though I might have disagreed with the decision. But it was being able to not be resentful for that, not make it personally about me, make it about the other choices. Whereas in the first case earlier in my career, I made it very much about me.
Right. For me, one of the things that helps me is really genuinely saying to myself, they know not what they do.
In a lot of ways that's true.
Because
I'll even go ahead.
Go for it. I was going to say, I don't think they know how much it's hurting me. And of course, a lot of it is based on my perception, my quote unquote perceived unfairness or injustice. And if I haven't verbalized that, then I'm in big trouble.
Yes. And here's the other thing is, so what I've said this, I've heard this said, and I like it. There are always 3 points of view: your point of view, my point of view, and the truth, which usually lies somewhere in between. Because your point of view and my point of view are based on perception, how I perceive it in relationship to the event, to whatever is going on and the other people involved.
Yeah.
And if you have a third neutral party observing it, they're going to look at it much differently. But because we're coming from our own perception, and that's almost the thing, is that we have to get out of ourselves.
Right. Okay. I have to give a shout out to Dr. Fred Blum, because he taught me this. And one thing that I really love about his podcast, In the World, Not of the World, is the title, is the 2D versus 3D. So for instance, right now, you and I are talking live. It's streaming out to multiple platforms. We're excited. We love doing this. It's a lot of fun. At least I am. I don't know about you.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. So I have a perception of what's happening, which is one dimension of what's happening, right? You have a perception of what's happening, which is another dimension. And so when what he says is, even if there's just the two of us and we're standing side by side in the same conversation or witnessing the same event, that I have my interpretation of what happened in that event, and you have your interpretation of what happened in that event. So maybe we're going from 2D to 3D. So now it's not that I know exactly what happened and I'm right. It's that you bring more depth to the picture. So from my perspective, it like opens up, oh, maybe I could see where someone would interpret what I did that way. Okay, I can own that. It makes it easier to not have to be right and absolute.
Yes.
Trevor says it's mathematically proven.
Well, you know, the phrase when having a discussion with someone, especially if it's you know, you're opposed in some way, you might be right, goes a long way.
Well, and it's true, because they could they could really genuinely be having that experience, right? That doesn't match mine, you know, and because they have that experience, it can open me up to seeing things from a different way, but only if we communicate about it. Because you know, I cannot, even if, let's say, you got quiet and I thought, oh, she's just tired of talking right now or something like that, right? Then that doesn't tell me something's going on. Let's say I did or said something and then you go quiet, but I don't know that I did or said something. Then there's nothing I can do about it. So we have to come back and talk about it. And sometimes, I mean, at least in my book, I forget sometimes. And then I think it's, quote unquote, I'm going to quote myself, falling all on my shoulders. which quite frankly, when someone mirrored that back to me and I realized what I said, I was like, wow, that is a very victim-like perspective that I hadn't even realized that I was carrying around, just even in the way I was talking to myself. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And the word perception, again, it, you know, how you perceive it, and you know, again, the stories that we tell
ourselves
about that. Yeah. So take the example of the silence. Okay, she's silent. Well, what's going on? Did I say something to offend her? You know, oh no, maybe I did. Oh, what am I going to do about that? You know, or am I just going to go on? Or are you oblivious to it and then come back? Why is she so quiet? Why is she mad at me? Why is she not talking to me? What's her problem? You know, you can perceive it in so many different ways, but then it builds it up. Exactly, Trevor. The mind will believe whatever you tell it. and those are the stories we built, and that's the resentment.
For sure. Well, Kat, it's 30 minutes. Do you have one last thing you wanted to say?
I got a lot more to say on this, but you know, I think Trevor said it well. The mind will believe whatever you tell it, so tell it positive things. I think that's a step to not building resentments.
That's awesome.
So.
Well, I'm Angela.
And I'm Kat.
And this is Relatively Damaged Live. There's also a Relatively Damaged podcast where I interview amazing guests who overcome some sort of struggle in their lives and how they found hope and healing. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and many more. See you next week.